In addition to strong C and CH bonds, organic molecules also contain some other features, structural features, which we call it as functional groups. So, what is a functional group? It is a atom or group of atoms with characteristic physical and chemical properties. And or another way of saying is a functional group present in a compound determines all the properties of a molecule, its shape, physical properties, and the chemical reactions or the type of reactions it undergoes. Now here, let's say we have, how do we write it down, the functional group? Um, if you look at this compound here, this is, I put a chain of 3 carbons and then OH is attached. In this compound here, this OH is the functional group which is bonded to carbons. So we say, another way of saying is, this compound, your functional group is same, functional group is attached to the carbon backbone. Now this compound, if you take a compound with 1 carbon, or if you take a compound with around 20 carbons, as long as this OH group, this functional group is present, then all those compounds behave exactly almost the same way. So what we do, so if the functionality of this compound is due to the presence of this functional group, that means we emphasize more on that and we just write down R. And what does R represent? R means carbons. It could be any number of carbons, mostly 1 to 20. And because this is not that much important, the important is what functional group is present. So the most common functional groups can be subdivided into 3 types. The first type is hydrocarbons, and I'm not sure how clearly you can see that, but I was not able to put a bigger size than this. The first one is alkanes, and alkanes have only C single bond C. All are single bonds, there is nothing else, and these all are hydrogens. And so there is no functional group. So the compounds containing the single bonds are known as alkanes, and there is no functional group. We cannot say there is any functional group here. The next one is alkenes. Alkenes have a C double bond C, and so we say the functional group present is a double bond. For example, let's say if the question is what functional group is present in this compound, then you say double bond. That's a functional group. Now, if I'm not, when I put these bonds, you have to assume that there are hydrogens here. The next is alkynes. Alkynes have a C triple bond and as their functional group. So if you look at this compound, let's say, and again these are hydrogens, which functional group is present in this compound? This triple bond. So triple bond is the functional group present, or another way of saying is the functionality of this compound is due to the presence of this triple bond. The next one is aromatic compound. Any compound that contains a benzene ring is um, is an aromatic compound. And what is a benzene ring? Benzene ring, this is known as benzene ring. This or this you can draw it. So here it's a 6-membered ring with alternate single and double bonds. There are 3 double bonds but alternate: double, single, double, single, double, single. So any compound that has benzene ring in it, we say the functional group present is benzene. So let me take one example of this. So for example, If I write down this compound here, um, let me write this down. Let me write down here on this side because I'm not getting enough space. So here, if you look at this compound, so it say what functional group is present. So as long as you see this benzene ring, you write down benzene. The next category is that compounds that contain a carbon heteroatom single bond. So carbon heteroatom single bond means, so for example, the first one is alkyl halide. So any number of carbon atoms, 1, 2, 3 or 10, attached to halide. Halides are your 7th A group elements: fluorine, chlorine, bromine or iodine. So if we have something like that, then what functional group is present here? So we have fluoride present here, or we can say fluorofunctional group. If we have chlorine in Cl, we can say chlorofunctional group. And so the functional group is this present here. Now, if you have any number of carbons, I'm going to the next one, and if you have OH attached to the number of carbons, then we call these compounds as alcohol. These are alcohol compounds and they contain the functional group OH, which is known as hydroxyl functional group. Now, given in the exam, if you will say the functional group is hydroxyl or alcohol, both will be the correct answer. The next is ethers. Ethers, for example, you have oxygen in between two carbons. Again, or means carbons. If you have oxygen present in between two carbons, then we call that functional group as ether functional group. If you have any number of carbons attached to NH2, then this functional group is known as amino functional group. So what functional group is present in this compound? Amino. The next category is the compounds that contain a C double bond O group, which is also C double bond group, which is also known as carbonyl group. So let's look at the very first example, which is aldehyde. So we have this carbonyl group. This is known as carbonyl group. And if we have carbons on one side and hydrogen on another side, then this functional group here is known as aldehyde functional group. On the other hand, if on both sides we have carbons attached, then we call that as ketone. Another one is on one side you have on one side you still have carbons, but on the other side you have OH. Then now this functional group is known as these are carboxylic acids, and this functional group is known as carboxyl, or you can also call it the functional group is carboxylic acid. Now you cannot pick OH for this. You cannot say this is alcohol functional group is present, because for alcohol OH has to be attached to just the carbon, while in this case OH is attached to the carbonyl, not the just carbon. And what is carbonyl? C double bond O. Now the next one is ester. So again, let's get rid of this. If we have R on one side means carbon on one side, any number of carbons, and on the other side we have O and then R. Then this functional group C double bond O is known as ester functional group. The last one is, if we have here, I'm going to put NH2. If we have NH2 attached to this carbonyl, then we call this functional group as amide. And again, you cannot pick amino for that like we did in this case, because for amino, NH2 is just attached to carbon. For example, CH3 NH2. This nitrogen is an amino group is attached to carbon. On the other hand, if you have something like that, NH2, then this NH2 is attached to carbonyl. In that case, the functional group is amide. So let's look at these practice problem questions. For example, this is the compound number 1. What functional group is present here? So this is OH. You can write down the answer as hydroxyl or alcohol. The second one was the functional group. So this is C double bond O, which is known as carbonyl, but you have to look what's present on both sides. On both sides is just carbon, so that's a ketone. If you have oxygen in between two carbons, that's ether. Again, this carbonyl, on one side is the carbons, but on the other side is the hydrogen, so it's an aldehyde. Now in this one, you have NH2 group attached to the carbon, so you can write down amine or amino.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.